All right, I guess we'll start. So, as I was just mentioned to stall, most of what we're doing tonight is flying. There's a little bit of discussions at the beginning related to how to do air to ground planning for night ops and strike planning and whatever. But most of this is meant to give everyone a feel for how it is to fly and navigate at night with, in principle, just a wingman, but we may be flying together as a whole package. Um, and to point out some things that may be obvious and some things that probably aren't necessarily so obvious about night missions and therefore things to consider when you're planning night strikes. So if you need to configure yourself to get into the game, now's the time to do that.
All right, stand by.
I'm in a laptop in a hotel, so there's not going to be much flying on my side.
Okay, so I guess we'll talk about some things about night strikes and night planning. Um, some things that are obvious. I guess we'll start with that. Obviously, your visibility is reduced, and you're going to be leaning pretty heavily on night vision goggles. I don't know how the night vision goggles work with VR, if they only illuminate one eye or not. But if they're only illuminating one eye, then you're also going to lose your depth perception that you've come to rely on in VR.
They do illuminate both, at least in the Tomcat, so that's nice.
Right. Yeah, different aircraft may be configured different ways. There aren't very many aircraft in this game that can put out illumination flares. So, apart from having kind of some smart scripting to have nearby artillery put illumination flares in the area, unless you're flying with one of those aircraft and that guy agrees to carry illumination flares, you should expect to conduct your bombing entirely with night vision and whatever lights are available from the fires that are kicked up by targets you've hit. So I don't know how obvious those things are, but those are some of the obvious ones. Some other obvious things to be aware of is as you're maintaining formation, you probably want to give yourself a little bit of extra room because of low visibility. And you probably don't want to be pulling nearly as many aggressive maneuvers just to allow everybody who is in your flight at this point. In principle, there's only one other person, but later there could be three or everybody in the package, just to give everybody some extra leeway to stay together and not have to wrestle and try to jiggle back into position and delay the mission trying to rejoin everyone. Questions on those topics? Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about lighting. We better talk about lighting because I haven't talked about that yet. Uh, you may or may not know it, but the game models, for the AI at least, how far away it's able to see you, especially at night, based on whether or not you have external lights on. So we really haven't talked about it much in air-to-air or air-to-ground until this point. But especially for night strike operations, you're going to want your lights off, and you're going to want them off essentially for the duration of the time that you're in adversary airspace. It's possible you may need to turn them on to get people to rejoin or identify the flight leader or what have you, but you're certainly going to want them off when you're over the operating area. What questions do people have on lights or the way that the game models it all?
Is there a specific configuration, like does flight lead turn off the anti-collision, everyone else on? Is there anything like we have to be aware of for that?
I don't know if there's necessary anything to be aware of. On takeoff, the lead might want to have his anti-collision on, just so it's easy to identify who the lead is and get yourself organized that way. But in general, if you took off, you probably took off from a friendly airbase, and if you took off from a friendly airbase, you're probably pretty far away from the front line of troops and therefore adversary airspace. So you're free to use essentially navigation lights as you want at that point. Once you've kind of crossed the flot and you're ready to kind of fence in, that's when you're going to want to cut lights, except in very specific instances. I guess another instance where you're probably going to want lights on, even though you are operating at night and far away from an friendly airfield, is when you're doing aerial refueling itself.
Connect air supply.
Just so that everyone knows where the aircraft are and they aren't colliding with each other.
Ground power on.
Part of that depends on whether or not everybody is operating with night vision
Connect
goggles
air
or not.
supply.
If they are, obviously you don't want the lights to be super bright, so it's blinding everyone with all of that bloom.
Copy. Ground air supply is now connected.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, what other questions are there on lighting as it is modeled in this game?
The other thing too is with strobe lights, they can be they're really great for far light because
Light.
Is that better?
Alrighty.
Any other questions on lighting in this game? Okay, so I've heard some people talk about or mention this term during scenarios so far, and I just mentioned it just now, this concept of fencing in. Does anyone know what fencing in is or what it means?
Isn't that like effectively where you turn on your master arm, get everything ready to go effectively, tune your sensors on, off, depending on the situation, basically ready for combat?
True. It is preparing to enter essentially the adversary airspace, but it does not necessarily mean you're turning on your master arm. What a lot of What a lot of people in the DCS community don't really understand or know, at least that I've seen, is that FENCE is an acronym. Does anyone know what the acronym is? Right, so it's Fire Control System Electronic Countermeasures, FE, Navigation, Communications, and Emitters. So it's essentially check and secure all of those things in preparation to enter the adversary airspace. In this game, the adversary does not model electronic intelligence or communications intelligence. But in the real world, those are significant factors. So as part of the fence-in procedure, you may go without radio comms, and you may switch to non-radio communication. Certain lights turning on or off, or certain wing rocks mean certain things because you cannot afford to be detected on, especially the inbound, by the adversary.
Okay.
Fence-in does not have anything to do with the master arm. The master arm is one of the last things that you're going to manipulate before you fire or release any kind of munition. Other questions on, or what questions are there on the fence-in procedure or what fence means? All right, so when the call comes to fence in and everyone's jiggling their lights and adjusting their radios in principle and turning on jammers, although that's barely modeled in this game, and all this other stuff. Essentially, what you've done is you've entered a higher state of awareness or alertness. In principle, you are in greater danger. You've probably left the safety of friendly SAM coverage. You may have also left the safety, or you may be preparing to leave the safety of prompt, friendly, air-to-air cover.
Request room.
You may also switch to a phase of the flight where you need to be significantly, have your brain significantly turned on. For example, maybe you took off from the carrier and you're flying inland and you were cruising at 18,000 feet. Okay, it's time to fence in, because once everyone has finished their fence in checks, we're going to start our descent into the deck in preparation to enter some valley as part of the strike plan, and we're going to be flying low, 500 feet off the deck or lower at high speed, cutting in and out of canyons and things like that. So the fence in check is kind of a significant event, especially for the air to ground guys, because it lets you know that you've kind of left the safety net, and and as time evolves, you're going to get closer and closer to the enemy, which increases your danger, but it's also where your mission is. All right, any other questions on the fence in check? Okay, so then, not surprisingly, there is a fence out check. After you've bombed the target and you've left the area and you're reasonably safe, you see friendly caps more or less overhead, or they're maybe 15 or 10 miles away, or you've entered friendly SAM coverage or whatever. Now might be the time to fence out, and you don't have to be as heightened aware. You can kind of relax. The mission's almost over. You can turn the lights on more freely. You can talk on the radio more freely. Things like that. So fence in and fence out, has a lot more stuff, a lot more implication in the real world than it does in this game, because this game doesn't model a lot of that stuff. But it's still a kind of a state of now things are getting serious, and it's time to put your game face on until you fence out. So just because you drop bombs on targets doesn't mean you get to let your guard down. You've now stirred up the hornet's nest and pissed off the enemy. You need to get out of the area. Once you hear the fence out call, that's kind of your milestone, that okay, now I can kind of relax a little bit, loosen my straps, get a little bit more comfortable. There's probably about 20 minutes left on the mission before we head back to base, or we trap on the carrier, or whatever it is. All right, questions on the fence out or the fence in calls? Okay, let's talk about the target area. So you may establish some kind of pattern over the target area like you did during daylight. The pattern should probably be a little bit looser, and you should probably provide a little bit of extra spacing for each aircraft. Just because it's dark, situational awareness isn't as high because it's harder to see everyone, etc. Losing 20 seconds on people coming in and dropping bombs is probably acceptable compared to losing an airplane or crashing into each other and losing 2 aircraft. So slow and steady and under control is better than being out of control and thinking that it's exciting. If it feels exciting, it probably tells you that you are on the verge of being out of control. Air-to-ground operations, especially at night, should feel very under control, very methodical. You're just going through the motions like you've practiced time and time again. Everything should be under control, nothing unexpected. You should be able to think 5 minutes ahead, and everything that's supposed to happen in the next 5 minutes happens in the next 5 minutes without any unexpected delay or anything cropping up or anything being not happening. Questions on kind of the pace of operations for air-to-ground strikes, especially at night, slowing it down a little bit, taking a little bit of extra time, ensuring that everything is going the way that you practiced it during the daytime, because you don't want unexpected things to happen while you're bombing at night and then try to debug that unexpected thing live in the moment while you have night vision goggles on and reduced visibility and reduced situational awareness. Okay, the adversary and you, because it's nighttime, are going to rely on artificial sensors versus your natural sensors, eyeball. So the adversary is going to lean more heavily on radar, and so are you. You may want to have fairly large separation, perhaps on the order of 4 to 8 nautical miles on the ingress. There's no way you're going to be able to see each other with lights off and potentially clouds that kind of settle at night and fog and other things. So you may want to use your air-to-air radar to keep track of, if you're the wingman, for example, in trail formation, to keep track of your flight lead and where he is. That may not have been as important during the daytime because you could look out way out in front of you and keep a visual lock on your flight lead. Questions on employing artificial sensors, especially radar, and their increased leverage on both sides at night.
If you're using air-to-air radar, then that would also make you more visible to the opponents.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, that's, of course, a trade-off. If you're flying down low, nothing except things in the immediate vicinity on the ground are going to be able to sniff your radar, but adversary aircraft may be able to. So you need to be smart about how you're using radar. For example, you're going to almost surely, if you're interested in mission control, you're almost surely going to be paying a lot of attention to the elevation of your radar dish. You don't want to be spraying a bunch of energy up. And probably if you're doing that, the geometry of the situation is going to lend itself to prevent that anyway. If you're in trail formation and the flight leads up there, you're probably not going to be below him in altitude. And if you are, not by much, you're probably going to be at his altitude or potentially a little bit higher. And so your radar elevation should already be spraying energy
Disconnect
down
air supply.
into the ground and not so much into the sky.
Ground power off.
But don't drive around with a 4 or 6 bar scan when you're doing that. You should be in 1 bar scan, and you should be managing your radar elevation to maintain contact with your flight lead who's up ahead. Other questions on employing radar for navigation purposes and keeping the flight together, especially at night. Okay. I think that's the end of all of the obvious and not so obvious things about the mechanics of actually doing it. There are some additional considerations when you're doing the strike planning. As we mentioned last time, you can't necessarily rely so much on visual flight rules navigation. So you're going to rely on more instrumented navigation, GPS type of things, or some type of TACAN fix if it's available. If you're going to rely on visual navigation, you're not going to rely on seeing a farm. You're going to rely on seeing something gigantic like a snowy peak. So you're looking for big things. You don't get the nuance in the visual realm that you do during the daytime. Once you get in the target area, we've already talked about kind of expanding operations there. There's more stuff that we could talk about from the real world, but the game just doesn't model it. Ground illumination and other things. There's some patterns you can put down if you had IR strobes or IR flare. We don't have any of that stuff in this game. It's kind of too bad, so we won't talk about it here. Let's see. Let's talk about some different aircraft types. So in this game, probably the aircraft that rules the night strike operation is going to be the Harrier. It's got that camera in the nose that can see at night, it's infrared and whatever, and superimpose that on the HUD. So he has a lot of good situational awareness. Later on, the F-18 is supposed to get the AT FLIR and supposed to be able to project all that stuff onto the HUD. So the Hornet will probably catch up for the most part. But as it stands today, probably the Harrier is the one that takes the cake for night operations. Questions on different aircraft types?
Does the presence of a pod change that? Because I know the pod on the A-10 also has a few different FLIR settings and capabilities for night ops as well.
Does it project it up on the HUD?
Yeah, you can. Oh, well, no, not up on the HUD. You can put it on an MFD as a sensor event.
Yeah, I mean, that's extraordinarily dangerous to be trying to fly the plane looking down at the small little soda straw. If you can do it, more power to you, but I don't recommend it. So anyway, that has implications for your strike route planning. If you have a Harrier with you, you probably want that guy up in front so he can kind of see what's coming up. He has better situational awareness than people who cannot project that stuff onto the HUD and have to look down or manipulate something, get that soda straw pointed in the right way. You know, it's up to you, but that ground is there and it's unforgiving. Other questions on different aircraft types in this game?
Surprising that more of them don't have better abilities, given what's available in the commercial market with stuff with synthetic vision and combined IR.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess because it's only been a fairly recent push to have night not totally suck in this game engine.
I guess since we're on the subject, I wondered, based on your experience, I mean, I'm assuming other aircraft that can use a targeting pod can do this as well, but does it change things at all if you can select and then slave the pod to targets essentially so that you're not having to maintain a lock or a track on it? If it does it automatically, do you feel like that changes it at all, or is it primarily being able to get it up in the HUD to see it right in front of you?
So what we're talking about here is the navigation portion of kind of the ingress for the strike route planning. So you're not looking at a target.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
You want to be able to see that mountain up in front of you.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about a digital representation that is actually up front.
Right. So let's see. Some other things I'll point out. So some of the modules in this game actually model it, but I think hardly anyone who plays this game, even those aircraft, use it. The A4 models it, the MiG-19 models it a bit, the MiG-21 models it, but I hear it's somewhat broken. Upcoming soon, supposedly the F-18 is going to model it, and the Viggen got an overhaul almost a year ago to model it, but that's air-to-ground radar. And in particular, air-to-ground radar that's paying attention to what's up in front of you to facilitate your navigation. So again, if you're flying one of those modules, I mean, great, but you should also learn how to use the air-to-ground radar to facilitate night navigation. Air-to-ground radar isn't there to provide you a pretty picture of the ground necessarily. It's there to augment your eyeballs at night for night navigation, because your eyeballs are not very good at night. Whereas radar can pay attention to things like phase, plus it's not affected by clouds and other stuff. And so it's especially effective at night compared to your eyeball. So again, if you are flying one of those kinds of modules, it's worth learning the air-to-ground radar modes, even if it's kind of early generation radar like the A4, because it's still going to let you know that there's a hill up in front of you that you may not see, simply because it's bouncing radiation off that. Questions on air-to-ground radar? Okay. That's pretty much the end of the discussion of all these things. Most of what you need now at this point is experience operating at night in general, and especially experience operating your career aircraft at night, so you know what deficiencies you have and what things you need to work on there. Once you have all of that under your belt, you can start to begin night operations planning and get some practice with that. Fly the plan that you came up with and see what worked well and what didn't work well. What assumptions did you have that weren't good? I assumed I'd be able to see this. I don't know. Maybe there was a small little depression in the ground. I assumed I'd be able to see it because I could see it during the day because the sun cast a shadow, and at night I could barely see it. So that wasn't a good thing to key off of visually, as an example. Oh, speaking of that, one thing that is in the realm of obvious, except for some people it wasn't obvious until I pointed it out, is you better check the moon phase and when the moonrise is and how full the moon's going to be if you're going to fly at night. If it's a new moon, it's probably going to be a pretty painful experience. If it's a full moon, it's going to be almost like daytime, especially if you have night vision goggles on. So don't forget about the moon if you're planning night strike missions. And that's, by the way, again, the game engine is modeling it at during a full moon, the adversary can see you at a farther distance than they can with a new moon, even if you turned your lights off. All right, I think that's all the big points. What questions do people have before we hop into the game and just do some kind of practice together as an informal package at the 64 Alpha range?
Is the non-scenario servers, or like maybe I should say non-scenario mission files, is the moon phase equivalent to that location at the date on which you're on the server, or is there some other way to know?
It's not the date in which you're on the server. It's the date that I made the mission file. So when I make the mission file, it is literally that day. So for example, this mission file was made a few days ago. So I think the date, well, I guess I can pull it up since I'm in the mission. That date is, where is my date now? Oh, it doesn't show the date in the F10 view.
Says 513.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So May 13th, 2020 is the date inside the DCS Academy Server 1 mission right now.
Okay, so since it's not really changing day to day, the best thing is to just log in some point, check the date, and assume, unless you learn otherwise, that it'll be that same day and therefore the same moon phase in a couple days from now when you're going to actually fly.
Yeah, so the mission files, especially for Server 1, are typically updated as infrequently as 1 week, but they're typically updated every 3 to 4 days. And they have been in large part because for the people who I thought would fly at night, although I don't think there are many people flying at night, they would notice that the moon phase is modeled in this game as it is in the real world. So you can just type moon phase into Google and get the calendar. Other questions on everything we've talked about before we hop in and just kind of get some elementary practice and exposure? Okay. Let's see. I recommend channel 123.0 for kind of the general CTAF and maybe communications between aircraft outside of the range. Once you're in the range, you should probably all be on 377.8. So I don't know if anyone
Copy.
else is going to be flying at night outside of the range, but at least it confines all the radio traffic for aircraft flying in the North Range to that frequency, so everyone has a common reference there and doesn't have to monitor two different frequencies. So 377.8 as normal and 123 as the general CTAF on the other radio. All right, let's hop in the server. If people want to try to take off together as a package or kind of ingress, you can do that. Another thing you can do is kind of come up with a crude ingress plan by looking at the F10 map and then see how well you were able to find your visual markers or what have you as you actually fly it. Then we'll get into the target area. The 64 Alpha range is already online. The JTAC is up. When you have your night vision goggles up, you'll see that laser pipe between the JTAC and the target that he's lasing. So that's something you could not see during the day. So even if you don't have laser guided bombs, you can still use that JTAC's laser to see where that target is on the ground and put dumb bombs or what have you directly on that target. So that's another variation that may not be so obvious that's modeled in this game. All right, any other questions before we hop in and just kind of fly around in the server?
I'm sorry if you addressed this before, but I guess in certain missions we won't have reliable TACAN and stuff. Do you recommend not using that, even though it's available here, so that it's a more realistic representation of what's available in missions and such, or scenarios and such?
You should probably get used to both and be able to operate if it suddenly goes offline. For example, for scenarios and missions, there probably isn't a TACAN that's operating in adversary airspace. But you'll know, for example, where the tankers are orbiting and they are operating a TACAN. So you'll be able to get it, and they're up high, so even when you're down low, you'll still be able to receive the signal. But it's possible that that tanker runs out of fuel and flies home, or comes off station, or gets shot down. You should be ready, or have at least a backup plan for what happens if I lose contact with this TACAN signal. Also, the TACAN signal is modeled in this game to have a maximum range, I think, of like 150 nautical miles or so. So again, the tankers tend to be well behind the flot, and if you are doing a deep strike, you may fly yourself out of that maximum TACAN range. And the game models it just a hard stop for some dumb reason, and they picked 150 for some dumb reason, but that's what you got. So anyway, my point is, probably if there's a TACAN around that you plan for, it's probably going to be online, but some of them may vanish suddenly for legitimate reasons, like they got shot down. And you should have a backup plan, because if your entire plan relied on that thing being there and it vanishes for whatever reason, now where the hell are you?
Well, and
Does that make
tankers
sense?
are moving, right, in their orbit, so
Yeah.
if you're on a
Yeah,
particular
the
radio,
tankers
you
are
need
moving in their
to be radio
orbit, but
10
their
miles
orbit's
away.
only 20 nautical miles long. And if you're flying 120 nautical miles away from them, um, it's not a precise fix, but it gives you a general idea of where you are. Other questions before we hop in and just kind of get some basic experience here? Okay, I'll be up in the air with you all if you have questions. We'll just take whatever air-to-ground munitions you like. As I mentioned, there's a JTAC there, so if you want to take laser MAVs or LGBs, you can do that. If you want to practice getting the JTAC status through the F10 menu and getting the coordinates off that to program into a JDAM, you can also do that. Or you can bring, unguided bombs and get some practice doing that as well. We'll just fly around. Strafing, of course, is an option. If you're in an A10 or something and you want to bring illumination flares for everyone, then people can get some experience with what that looks like in the battlefield. Plus, you get some experience deploying them. Anyway, there's lots of options. It's just meant to be a playground for the rest of our session. I'll see you guys inside the server.
Options. Now list traffic. Rage 1-1 type F-14 at parking spot G or Gulf 01, taxiing to runway 3 right for departure. Now list traffic.
Uzi 1-1, clear to taxi to runway 3. Path 2.
Now list traffic. Rage 1, position and hold runway 3 right. Now list traffic.
Uzi 1-1, unable to clear for takeoff. Uzi 1-1, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 27.87.
Copy. Switching to surface target.
Now list traffic. Rage 1, rolling runway 3 right. Now list traffic.
Ford 1-1, clear to taxi to runway 3. Path 2.
LS traffic, Rage 1, departing airspace to
Traffic.
the west, last
F-18,
call, LS
6 o'clock.
traffic.
3 miles. Friendly, Bra, 300, 36 miles, Angels 8. Oh, we got nails right on our 6. Oh, we got nails right on our... Okay. I've got some dirt, 12 o'clock. Dirt at 1 o'clock.
Options.
I've got some dirt, 12 o'clock. Hey, I got some dirt at 11 o'clock. And, oh, nails, 10 o'clock. Okay. Looks like there's dirt at 7 o'clock. I've got dirt at 6 o'clock. Okay. Copy. All right, I got dirt at 4 o'clock. Whoa, I got dirt at 1 o'clock. You got it. I've got dirt, 6 o'clock. Hey, I got dirt at 7 o'clock. Okay. You got it. I've got dirt at 5 o'clock. Whoa, I got dirt at 1 o'clock. Roger that. Hey, I got dirt at 7 o'clock. I've got some dirt on the nose. I got some dirt at 5 o'clock. Roger that. Oh, I got dirt at 2 o'clock. I've got some dirt, 12 o'clock. Looks like there's dirt at 7 o'clock. Oh, there's dirt at 9 o'clock. Shit, we've been hit! Hey, we got dirt, 7 o'clock. Showing dirt, 8 o'clock. Oh, there's dirt at 9 o'clock. Dirt behind us on our 6.
Juan, if you're up on this channel, I think that building I just hit is the one that's indestructible.
Yeah, I think all the buildings are indestructible.
I have dirt, 5 o'clock. I have dirt, 5 o'clock. Roger. We've got dirt, 1 o'clock. Roger. Looks like nails, 10 o'clock. Dirt on the nose, on the nose. There's dirt, 7 o'clock. Dirt on the nose, on the nose. Roger that. There's dirt, 7 o'clock. Looks like dirt on our 6. Showing dirt, 4 o'clock. Dirt on the nose, on the nose. Dirt, 11 o'clock. Roger. Dirt, 5 o'clock. And dirt, 6 o'clock. Got some dirt, 4 o'clock. Wilco. Okay, Roger. Okay, we got nails, 8 o'clock. Looks like dirt, 2 o'clock. Looks like dirt on our 6 and dirt, 12 o'clock. Nails, 4 o'clock. Dirt, 11 o'clock. Roger. Okay.
Is there like a good technique for the flares? Like, do you want to do a perimeter? Or do you want to do it over the top, or is it kind of just situation dependent?
Well, I mean, it is situation dependent. If you do a perimeter, you waste more. If you do it over the top, it's probably a good idea. In general, you want a 3,000 to 4,500 foot AGL over the target area.
Okay.
I have dirt, 5 o'clock. Dirt on the nose, on the nose. Got some dirt, 4 o'clock. Roger. Roger. Looks like dirt, 2 o'clock. Dirt behind us on our 6. I have dirt, 5 o'clock.
If you put them up higher, you'll get a longer illumination time, but of course the density of the light is low. Looks like with the improved night lighting, you may be able to come up to 6,000 feet AGL and get some good illumination.
Okay.
Alright, I'll try to pass the 6,000.
Wilco.
Also note the wind
I
blowing
have
these
dirt,
things.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, it was pretty evident too in the bomb fall line, man. Like that's pretty strong.
Dirt, 11 o'clock.
Is there like a general rule with mirrors to like always flip them off at night, or is it again kind of just more situational dependent?
I think they're pretty much useless at night, so save yourself the frame.
Hey, we got dirt, 7 o'clock. Okay. Dirt behind us on our 6. Roger. I have dirt, 5 o'clock. Looks like dirt, 2 o'clock. We've got dirt, 1 o'clock. Looks like dirt on our 6. There's dirt, 11 o'clock. Looks like dirt on our 6.
Alright, what questions do people have about night strikes and bombing after getting some practice?
I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. It's getting used to kind of the transitioning. Like after we started getting damaged, like you were saying, could actually take the NVGs off. Practice kind of keeping track of where all the other planes were. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Same but different, you know.
Who's putting those flares on the ground?
I have dirt, 5 o'clock.
They maybe are mine that fell. I don't know.
I'm guessing it's the A-10 that was operating in the air. Anyway, he probably thinks that you're supposed to fire those at the ground, like they're near-to-ground rockets, but they're actually rockets that fly out in front of you.
We've got dirt, 1 o'clock.
It's interesting too, being able to kind of keep track of like you as you fly through the explosion or the fires rather with the NVGs.
Yep. It's very different.
Yeah, it's almost a bit like BFM, like where you know you're gonna lose sight for a second, but you kind of know exactly where they're gonna pop out. Pretty similar.
Wait till we do AIC at night.
I'm switching planes to something with a helmet-mounted queuing system. Just kidding.
Afterburners are far more impressive at night.
Yeah, I imagine you want to kind of be sparing with those, right? Because you don't want them to be able to see you.
Yeah, I mean, if you dropped bombs on them, they know you're there.
Don't gotta tell me twice.
my targeting pod marker.
Oh yeah, I can see it. I went almost to Creech. I was going to try a pretty long-range toss bomb. Oh yeah, I see it. It just looks awesome. I assume, like, if you're fighting a relatively like inadvanced enemy, there's a very little danger of them seeing that, right?
Correct.
So is that used at all to help locate friendlies, or is that, you know, probably there's just better ways to do it?
It's used for a lot of different.
Yeah, because I mean, when you were doing that, I just noticed how immediately useful that would be to find you.
So one option is you just illuminate something on the ground and the guys looking up at you know which airplane they're talking. Another option is you can't find the target, but you put a marker on the ground and they just walk you in. All right, 300 meters north, okay, 400 meters west, okay, 50 meters north, 20 meters west, that target.
Oh, that's awesome. Is it sort of, I mean, I guess, gamey to kind of toggle the NVGs on and off? I imagine in real life you kind of cheat and kind of look out the bottom, but I guess just trying to figure out if that's a kind of cheating myself out of an experience if I keep toggling them on and off.
I mean, in the real world, it takes a lot longer for your eyes to recover its night vision than it does in this game. On the other hand, you know, you're never going to be doing night vision goggles in a fighter jet in the real world, so all that really matters is how it's modeled in this game.
Yeah, well, with VR, it can suck if it's super bright, I'll tell you that.
There should be a gain control so you can select how much it's amplifying one.
Oh yeah. There is for sure. I mean, otherwise it would be painful. But just like sometimes, like when you first turn them on, or if you do catch an explosion just right, it is blinding.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue you should keep them on just because that's kind of realistic. That bloom that comes out prevents people from getting immediate BDA.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to, like, I have to be able to at least somewhat be able to check my instruments. I think I either heard or read one of the guys saying, they basically kind of like look out the bottom, almost like I do in real life. Like if I need to write something down and I need to like kind of look down my nose at the, whatever it is. Oh, you know what? They actually do have that model in the F-14. It's just the VR is zoomed in too far, but you can actually look out the bot. That's cool. Did you just despawn something? Hold on, did you just despawn something like maybe 20, 30 seconds ago?
Negative.
Something blew up on the bottom of your chest.
No, the only reason that's like my frame rate just like went back up to like 45. It was pretty crazy.
Roger. Wilco.
Now it's traffic, Twinkie 1, taxi runway, ramp, taxi runway 03 right. Now it's... Uzi 1-1, clear to taxi to runway 3, path 2. Now it's traffic, Twinkie 1 taking runway 03 right now. Twinkie 1, Nellis Tower, you're clear for takeoff, runway 3 right. Clear for takeoff 3 right. Twinkie 1.
Nellis Tower, Bridge 1, 23 miles north, inbound for landing.
Range 1, expect right base for 2-1 left.
Uzi 1-1, unable to clear for takeoff. Uzi 1-1, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 27.87.
1, left turn, direct 64 up. Nels Tower, Twinkie 1, repeat your last transmission.
Options.
Yeah, you're cleared on course, direct 64 Alpha. So direct 64 Alpha, Twinkie 1.
Uzi 1-1. Fly heading 214. 42. QFE 27.87. Runway 21 to pass altitude.
Rage 1, 10 miles north, traffic in sight on my nose, 11 o'clock.
Rage 1, clear to land 2-1 left. Traffic should be turning off to the northeast. Northwest.
Dallas Tower, HawaiianRyan on approach to runway 21 left at 15 miles northeast of the airfield at 10,000, descending to 8,000.
HawaiianRyan, continue for 2-1 left, you'll be number 2.
Climb.
And HawaiianRyan, you're 3 miles in trails of F-14, slow to final approach speed, clear to land number 2.
1,000.
F-14 in sight, clear to land number 2, runway 21 left.
Uzi 1-1.
Traffic, 11 o'clock. 9 miles.
At 10 meters per second. Runway 21. Uzi 1-1. Go around, runway occupied. Uzi 1-1. Check landing gear.
400 feet.
Uzi 1-1. Go around,
300.
runway occupied. Uzi 1-1. Check landing gear. Wind 2-1. Uzi 1-1. Go around, runway occupied. Uzi 1-1. Check landing gear. Wind 210 at 10 meters per second. Runway 21. Uzi 1-1. Cleared for visual. Contact tower. Uzi 1-1. Taxi to parking area.
Rage 1, clear, 2-1 left.
Rage 1,
taxi to park.
Taxi Park, Rage 1.
Rage 1, you can remain my frequency.
Keep Freak, Rage 1.
And Hawaiian Ryan left at the end, taxi park with me. Good night.
Fine, Ryan left at the end.
Ryan just like Irish goodbye it?
Don't know what that means.
It means like basically just leave without telling anybody.
I guess so. Was he not talking at all? Like, hardly during.
Yeah, hardly would be the way I'd put it.
Yeah, because I was not seeing any sort of organization, just like you lighting up flares and then him just like bombing a bunch of shit nonstop.
Yeah, I was kind of, yeah, more playing off him, I guess. I was like, I guess from AIC, I get in the habit of kind of like acting like he's not there when he is.
Oh, I feel like I learned very little bit from a little. Sounds like Twinkie's got the awesome jet for the night bombing.